Yeah, I think the recording has started. Yes.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah. Please go ahead.
sure. So, a very good evening to all of you present here. This is Deepthi this side from Save Bangalore Committee, and we have with us Dr. Ashish Verma from the IST Lab from Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. So, it's a very interesting program that we're going to hold today. Thanks to Dr. Ashish Verma, who himself requested that why don't we do this on a weekend where people are available, and then a very important discussion on road accidents that many of us have seen directly, or maybe we've seen our friends and family go through this. So, having said that, I would like to give you a brief introduction about Save Bangalore Committee. Save Bangalore Committee is a Bangalore-based civic forum. It's a group of volunteers who are, into taking civic issues such as road widening, different problems that we face in a city like Bangalore. Metropolitan city has its own set of difficulties, right? So we've done a lot of thorough work, and taken a people's movement in the different issues like road widening, asphalting of roads, and then we had these water problems wherever you go across Bangalore, municipal areas, along with drainage issues. And then essentially we believe in creating awareness on these civic issues, and finally believe that a people's movement is essential to bring a change in society. And some of these issues that we have taken up has been spread across different part of the city. We are not confined to one particular area, but we've held seminars and conventions earlier in the past. Dr. Ashish Verma himself has been part of a couple of these webinars and seminars. One such event that I can recollect is the elevated corridor. Today also, if we see it in the newspaper, the elevated corridor is still in the news for different reasons. You all know, the people have come out, asked that do we really need this elevated corridor? How can we solve these civic issues? I mean, can we build better roads, provide better transport to common people so that life becomes easy? And a place like Bangalore, all of you know, we commute from one part of the city to a different place. We'll have to almost spend 1.5 to 2 hours. I know I spend about 2 hours right in travel, right from where I stay to the place in Hebal. Now, having said that, we'll all have to come out with different solutions per se. Come and take an action plan. That's where Save Bangalore Committee is a forum where we bring out like-minded people together and then see what can be done. So we have our email ID put in the poster. Most of you would have got. Please feel free to contact us. And talking about today's webinar on the importance of why we must recognize road accidents as an epidemic. As you all know, road accidents account to leading cause of death among people across the world, not just in a country like India. And in a place like India, it accounts to about 5 lakh road accidents annually, one of the highest in the world, to be very frank, in which about 1.5 lakh people die and the other 3 lakh people get crippled. Now, is there a way forward? Yes, I think this is one of the forum where we could all discuss, and we have Dr. Ashish Verma with us. So Professor Verma and his team at the IST Lab, which is the IISc Sustainable Transportation Lab, they've they're going to emphasize on some of the measures based on the outcomes of their scientific research, and most importantly highlight the fact that this is also an epidemic in India. We've all seen, we all gone through this COVID-19 process last year. All of us have been during the lockdown times. You've faced difficulties, but it's high time that we also recognize this as an epidemic. And Dr. Verma is going to present his findings and measures with along with his team. Just to give you a brief, a bio of Dr. Ashish Verma. Dr. Ashish Verma is the convener of IISc Sustainable Transportation Lab, which is known as the IST Lab from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He's a PhD from the IIT Bombay and is currently serving as the Associate Professor of Transportation Systems Engineering at the Department of Civil Engineering, Center for Infrastructure, Sustainable Transportation and Urban Planning, known as SISTUP, and Robert Bosch Center for Cyber Physical Systems at the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. Further, he was a visiting professor at the ITMO University, St. Petersburg, Russia, and a visiting fellow at the Queensland University of Technology, Brisbane, Australia, during 2019. He's also served in IIT Guwahati and the Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development Authority, known as MMRDA. His research interests are in sustainable transport planning and policy, integrated public transport planning and management, transport and quality of life, known as QOL, transport and climate change, modeling and optimization of transportation systems, travel behavior analysis and modeling, pedestrian and crowd flow modeling, driver behavior and road safety, and intelligent transport system, traffic control and management, etc. Professor Verma has authored more than 195 research publications in the area of sustainable transportation and road safety. He's also authored a book on public transport planning and management in developing countries, along with Professor T.V. Ramanaya, who's a retired professor from the IIM Bangalore, uh, also published by the CRC Press, and another book called Integrated Public Transportation System Planning and Modeling, published by the VDM Publishing House Limited. He's also the editor of the journal called Transport Policy, Elsevier, associate editor of Urban Rail Transit, Springer, and Journal of Modern Mobility System, Mason Publishing. He is the founding and the current president of the Society Transportation Research Group of India, known as TRG. He is presently serving as the steering and the scientific committee member of World Conference on Transport Research Society based in University of Leeds, United Kingdom. He is the chair of the technical committee of TRG on travel behavior and transport demand. He is also the chair of special interest group H2 of WCTRS, which is focused on transportation in developing economies. So you could also, visit his website, which is on the IISc portal, and get to know more about his research and project. So we are very honored, Dr. Verma, to have us with you today and grace this occasion. So I now hand over to you to present on this topic. So over to you, Dr. Verma.
Thanks, Deepti. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, you're good.
Thanks. Thanks for the introduction, and especially thanks to Save Bangalore committee for coming forward and jointly hosting this important webinar. As all of us know, we are in this road safety month being declared by Government of India to bring awareness about road safety aspect, among Indians. Every year at the start, this is celebrated as Road Safety Week. This time it is Road Safety Month. So we thought, I think it's a good opportunity to reflect back and understand this whole issue of road safety and road accidents in perspective, especially from data-driven understanding and some scientific analysis that my research lab has also been doing. So I'll share the screen so that I can show my slides. We can take the question answers at the end of the presentation. Hope that is fine for everybody. Just a minute. Screen. Okay. Are you able to see my title slide?
Yes, we're able to see.
Okay. So we are going to talk about road accident, and we'll deliberate and understand whether it's really an epidemic. Do we consider it as an epidemic, or is it just a traffic related issue? And if it is an epidemic, if it is a health hazard, what is the vaccine? And in this time of Corona, We are all talking about vaccine, vaccination, pandemic, etc. So I thought, taking that as a perspective, it's important to understand where do we stand in the country with respect to this whole issue of road accidents. So as I said, the first question that comes in the mind is road accident, whether is it just a traffic issue? Do we just treat it as one of the several traffic issues that Deepthi was also mentioning, travel time delays, traffic congestion and so on? Is it just a traffic issue, or do we consider it as health hazard? And if we consider it as health hazard, of what magnitude and what scale this health hazard exists, it's something important for us to understand. And if is that magnitude to a level of an epidemic? Mm, let's see from some of the data. I think it will not take many slides for us to come back to a conclusion as far as these questions are concerned. Firstly, when we look at the leading 10 top leading causes of death, okay, you would clearly see that road traffic injuries do fall under the top 10 causes of deaths, along with many other diseases and other, causes of deaths of human beings. And over time, you will see that the road traffic injuries and deaths due to road traffic injuries is actually climbing up as the major cause of death among the top 10 causes of death, which is something not good, and we need to improve upon and understand this. So this is definitely, from this data, one can see that it's already a health hazard and it's among the top 10 causes of deaths, and it's climbing up. If you look at, so the next question is, if it is a health hazard, then to what extent or of what magnitude is this a health hazard? And Deepthi also mentioned the statistics while she was introducing this topic. We are presently seeing almost 1.4 to 1.5 lakh deaths every year, which is about 10% of global road fatalities, which if you translate, I mean, over a year, we sometimes don't get a feeling of what the scale is. So if you translate this into daily deaths, what we are actually seeing is about 400 deaths per day, which is like equivalent to 2 jumbo jet crash every day with no survivors. Okay, we are literally seeing crash of 2 jumbo jets every day with no survivors, and we don't even blink our eyes. We don't even realize and make a hue and cry about it. Rohit, if I can request you to admit those who are waiting in the lobby, because I may not be able to do it as my whole screen is with the presentation. Uh, so so while it is a health hazard, we are also seeing the number of deaths, almost 400 deaths per day. Now, if we compare it with, all of us have seen this whole year passed by with this corona, virus situation. Now, if you look at the majority of time during this whole corona pandemic, and especially this early lockdown period, you would see that the number of deaths that were actually happening in the country due to the corona were actually lesser than the number of deaths per day we were seeing due to road accident. Okay, even today, what is the level of infections and number of deaths happening? It is much below that number of deaths that we were seeing because of road accident. So in actual, we saved many more lives from road accident than we actually lost due to corona during lockdown. So clearly, we can see that while it is a health hazard, among the top 10 causes of deaths, it's also to a magnitude where the number of deaths are actually more than per day lives that we were losing due to this pandemic, which we have taken much more seriously as compared to road accidents. Now, interestingly, 2011 to 2020 was declared by UN as the decade of action for road safety, where the target was to save 50 lakh lives in a decade. which is what UN had set up. Now, I don't know about the other countries and how world have been able to achieve this. If you look at India, over this decade, the number of deaths that we were having per day or over the year has only increased during this decade. Forget about, reducing it or, bringing it to half or anything. So we have literally not contributed anything to this decade of action for road safety. Now, interestingly, UN has now again declared 2021 to 2030 as new decade of action for road safety. Hopefully, India will do better in this new decade and will have, good sense prevail. And this whole issue of road accidents is being taken more seriously. Now the question is, again, coming back to the question that we asked at the beginning, is road accident an epidemic in India? And based on what I presented, one can reasonably conclude that yes, it is an epidemic. And I would really feel that Government of India should officially declare road accidents as an epidemic in India. Unless we do that and take it to that level of seriousness, will not be able to do anything or contribute to this new decade of action of road safety that UN has declared. I think we need to show same level of seriousness that we have shown for handling the corona pandemic, as we should, show for handling the road accident as an epidemic. So it's really important that government declares road accident as an epidemic and then deal with it accordingly. Now, when we see that it's definitely a situation of an epidemic, we also need to understand who are at high risk. Okay, which we have very nicely done when we think about COVID situation or corona. When we ask this question, who is at a higher risk to get infected with COVID-19? Clearly, we know that people who are 60 years or above in age, or those who have comorbidity health conditions like lung or heart disease, diabetes, or etc., who have less immunity and so on, they are the high risk people. And government has been very serious in basically vaccinating this high risk group first and secure their lives. But when we look at the road accidents, do we really know and understand who is at a higher risk and who is killing them on the road accidents? Probably not. So for this, we have to look back into the data and understand in terms of the road accident epidemic, who are the population or who are the groups which are at the high risk. That's very important for us to understand. Now, one of the piece of research that we have been doing is we have collected, data about all road accident related fatalities in whole BMR region, including the three districts of Bangalore metropolitan region. And right from 2011 till 2017, we have got access from State Crime Record Bureau of all the data related to all the fatalities due to road accidents. And what we created was, extracting the data manually from each of these FIRs, coding it, and then we created what we call it as who hit whom matrix. Now, when you look at this, what is important to see is this row sum or the row total. If you look at the end, the number of pedestrians dying is much higher or highest as compared to any other road users. Now, the row actually refers to the victim road user, that means who died, and column refers to the offender, that means who actually hit because of which the death of the person who is on the row died. Okay, so the total number of deaths are highest for pedestrians and then for two-wheelers. Okay, it's very clear from this data. Now, within this total deaths of pedestrians, if you look at closely, who is causing maximum deaths to pedestrians? It's the two-wheeler. So pedestrians are dying most because of being hit by two-wheeler in Bangalore as compared to any other mode, followed by car, jeep, and other modes. Likewise, when you look at two-wheelers, they are dying most by being hit by heavy vehicles, and then other category of vehicles. So if you look at the same data in a bar chart, you would see here the this bar, which actually represents pedestrians. So pedestrians are the ones who are dying maximum because of being hit by two-wheeler. This is an interesting fact for us to understand. And then the other modes like car, jeep, and in many cases we don't even have data about who actually hit them. It's like hit and run situation. Likewise, if you look at this bar, and the highest bar is of two-wheeler, and you would see that two-wheelers are the ones, two-wheeler users are the ones who are dying most because of being hit by the heavy vehicles. Now, we have been extracting and collating data from 2011 to 2016 on all such fatalities. And what you would see interestingly here is, for the share of vulnerable road users, that means those who are dying most, whether it is 14, 15 or 16 data, the share of pedestrian, two-wheeler and cyclist is actually more than 90% in all the cases. So you can see that if you even just take pedestrians and two-wheeler users, they account for more than 90% deaths due to road accident in Bangalore. So it's very important for us to understand when they are the ones who are more than 90% involved in deaths. Whatever interventions we are targeting to improve the situation of road accidents, whether they are improving or reducing the fatality of these vulnerable road users or not, pedestrians and two-wheeler. Such kind of understanding is very important to think about targeted interventions that one has to do. Even when you look at in terms of gender and age, you clearly see a trend. The most important thing I wanted to highlight was, although the trend for male fatalities look more clear and a little unclear for female, but what is very clear is the vulnerable age group is the young population in both the case of male as well as female. This is the most ironical situation that a country can have, where the young age group, which is the most productive age group of the country, is more vulnerable to deaths due to road accidents. We are losing our future people who are going to shoulder the responsibility of the country and drive it. So losing those lives is a biggest irony, and one has to really focus on this age group, particularly how to improve the situation of the number of deaths happening of this age group. So who are the high risk or vulnerable road users, as we call it as VRUs? It's the pedestrians, cyclists, two-wheelers, and persons with reduced mobility who still account for a substantial proportion of road accident victims. Not just death, but also permanent damage or to the body in some or the other form. So pedestrians, among this data and statistics, pedestrians of older age groups are most affected in case of both the genders, male and female. Also, pedestrians of younger age group are seen highly vulnerable as compared to other modes. And two-wheeler fatalities are very much high for the age group of 20 to 39, as they more propensity to use private modes, and their motivations for driving two-wheelers are quite different than other age groups. So when this is the situation, now we understand that road accident is an epidemic. We have also clearly identified who are the vulnerable, road users. So clearly, to deal with this epidemic, we need a vaccine. Okay, so what is the vaccine for road accident epidemic? So talking about vaccine, when it comes to coronavirus, today we have a clarity. Okay, we have Covaxin and Covishield. We know how much dose we need to take. 2 doses in a spacing of about a month, and we are secured for life, at least from coronavirus. Okay, but when it comes to road accidents, okay, it's not just one vaccine. You take Covishield or Covaxin, any one of them, take 2 doses and done. Road accidents is a much more complex epidemic, um, and it actually requires three different vaccines, as we call it as 3 E's. One is engineering. Now, this vaccine, you really need, maybe less frequent higher dose and more frequent lighter dose. When I say less frequent higher dose, we need to, from time to time see what engineering interventions are required, road safety audits to be done, on annual basis and even more frequent, to figure out junctions, locations, road sections where, from a road safety audit perspective, improvements need to be done on the engineering aspects. So while we need this less frequent higher dose, we also need good maintenance of roads on a more frequent lighter dose, I would say, in terms of keeping the road surface quality better, avoid potholes. Even with potholes, we are seeing a lot of two-wheelers dying because of, potholes. Second is education, and here you actually need a daily dose. This yearly dose of road safety week once in a year at the start of the month is not good enough for us to be safe from this road accident epidemic. Every day in the morning, we need to be reminded by our loved ones that you got to wear helmet, you got to wear your seat belt, you got to take care of safe driving and so on. So it really requires a daily dose. Even enforcement, which is the third E, the third vaccine that we need, again daily dose is required. Enforcement of traffic laws need to be done 24/7 by 365, using as much as possible the use of technology to avoid human interventions and avoid corruption and loopholes in the system. So if you are certain that you are moving out of a house and driving, and you commit a traffic law violation and you are going to be punished or fined for that, then it certainly would act as one of the good vaccines for road accidents. So I can say these doses are recommended by our IST lab. If we really follow it, I'm sure we can save ourselves from this road accident epidemic. Now let's go a little more deeper into what these 3 E's are, and something that we can derive from few research work that we have done in our lab. When it comes to education, we are actually talking about bundle of things, whether it is awareness sessions in schools, colleges, through traffic parks. Many countries I've seen teachers compulsorily take students wearing those reflective jackets to take them onto the road, explain them how rules are, what a signage means, how they should behave on the road and so on. Other sessions like what we are doing today, media awareness programs, banners, hoardings, all that is fine, but a key part of the education and improvement of the human factors is the driver education and licensing. Going further, I would focus a bit more on this aspect within the first E, one of the vaccine, in terms of education. And when we think about engineering, the second vaccine, it's all aspects of traffic engineering, road geometry, transport planning, and aspects of these things that can, vaccinate us from the road accident pandemic. Third is the enforcement, and here we are talking about not just the traffic law enforcement by traffic police, but road transport authorities, how they should actually, enforce the maintenance of vehicles by having random inspections and allowing not vehicles which are not roadworthy to ply. Other things like credit systems and license, that means keep adding credit points as you make violations, and then have different levels of penalization as you accumulate more and more points, just like credit card or flying returns and so on. Um, Use of technology, ITS systems and so on. We'll deal into some of these things more, and we'll also look at this from the perspective of some of the research work and results from that from our lab. When we think about engineering factors, now just take a typical junction. If you just keep it as a it's a two-way four-leg junction. If you just keep it a unsignalized, uncontrolled intersection, you can see on one signal, one such junction itself, you will have so many possible conflict points. Okay. Now, what is the way to reduce these conflict points? One is you channelize that intersection. Okay, by having this kind of proper channelization, where it not just channelizes the different directions and movement of vehicles, but it also creates these channelizing islands which can act as safe refuge islands and help pedestrians maneuver on the junction safely. Likewise, if you convert a junction into a rotary junction, what you are essentially doing is you are converting those crossing conflicts into merging and diverging kind of maneuvers. Again, along with that, it becomes safer for pedestrians to use these islands to maneuver safely across a junction. These are simple engineering things that one has to do. Now, just taking example of CNR of circle in front of the IISc campus, we have this underpass, CNR circle underpass, which is beneath. You can see the arrows, and then you have this deck level situation. You have one road from Yeshwantpur. You have the CV Raman road coming from Yeshwantpur going towards Sadashiv Nagar police station, and you have a road going to Malleshwaram. You then have an entry to IISc, you have an entry to BHEL, and it's such a complex junction. You can see these many conflict points are there when you don't do any kind of channelization. So such kind of free spaces without any channelization, simple engineering measures can lead to a situation where it is dangerous for vehicles to maneuver, and it is a nightmare for pedestrians to venture in these kind of spaces. Now, when we see that pedestrians are among the highest, vulnerable road users, uh, uh, we are not in a good situation where most of our junctions where underpasses are there have these kind of uncontrolled deck level. This is a drone shot of the same CNR circle. One can clearly see how dangerous these kind of maneuvers can be for vehicles, where these vehicles coming from the Malleshwaram side trying to get into IISc campus are just cutting across and so on. Or this bus taking turn from the Malleshwaram side going towards the Sadashiv Nagar, and trying to cross these other vehicles. So interestingly, on this side, when you have an underpass, and below the underpass one can take either the turn towards Malleshwaram or towards CV Raman Road. Still, those who have to go towards CV Raman Road on the Sadashiv Nagar police station side end up coming on top of the deck instead of using that underpass because of the absence of signages, and so you are also wasting the resources of constructing such an underpass. So lack of direction signages, make people clueless when they are on this situation. So these are simple engineering measures that one can, think about and do instead of leaving. This is bad engineering, actually. Instead of leaving such open, uncontrolled spaces. Uh, you know, Even when signages are provided, this is the approach from the Yeshwantpur side towards the Sadashiv Nagar police station in Malleshwaram, and you see how small these signages are. Nobody even noticed them when they are, approaching the underpass. So we actually went ahead. It's been almost 2-3 years since we came up with this plan of proper channelization of this junction, and to regulate not just the movement in each direction, but also create these refuge islands which can be, safe passages for the pedestrians to maneuver in this whole area. This is the drawing of this junction with the proposed plan. And we have been banging our head with BBMP, with traffic police, without any success. Uh, in spite of the fact that this is a small, low-cost improvement, we are still, struggling to make them understand the importance of these low-cost engineering measures to improve situations and make, such junctions safer. So this is just one example that I'm, trying to give. And now, Coming back to the safety of the vulnerable road users, when you look at the engineering aspects, why do we need such high footpaths, such huge height of, curb height? It's like jumping up and jumping down every time you have to get onto the footpaths. Why do we do such things and make it, very difficult for anybody to use footpaths? In fact, in such situation, forget about a fully able person like us, even a disabled person or physically challenged person. Yeah, I mean, forgetting about them, even a normal able person will find it difficult to use. Likewise, you'll find all kinds of obstructions, wires, poles, signages, tree, etc., coming in the way of pedestrians, and you forcing the pedestrians to get into the carriageway and then be in a risk of being hit by fast moving vehicles. In some situations, you don't even care to provide footpaths and create, spaces where there is no walkability area, safe walkability area. This is interesting junction, where the width of the road is so high, and often you will see that the pedestrian signals, if at all they are provided, they don't even allow you to cross half of the road, and then you will be, in a situation to get hit by a vehicle which has got a green signal. So no refuge islands in between, inadequate timing of the signals, they can all lead to dangerous situation for crossing pedestrians. In fact, I always say walking on footpaths in India is like walking on landmine. Especially on many of our footpaths, you will see that they are actually created above the drain, stormwater drains, and with the slabs either broken or shaky or so on. So walking on footpaths is like you put your foot at a wrong point. In a landmine, you would be blown up, but in footpaths, you would actually cave down into those stormwater drains. Drivers may not always give signal their intended maneuvers. This is a big issue. We feel our right to take any turn and go any direction without giving any direction signals, and turning signals through their vehicle. So this makes it even difficult for the pedestrians to understand which direction a vehicle is trying to move and how they should save themselves from those vehicles. Often at intersections, the visibility can be poor, especially in nighttime. So understanding the road safety scenario in daytime, in daylight, as well as in nighttime is very important and to be taken care. Things can be very different in daytime as compared to in nighttime. I'm just taking you through a plight of a poor pedestrians to make feel the situations that we face on a day-to-day basis. Here you would find situations where there are holes. A poor pedestrian fell into a hole on footpath and broke his leg and knee. I hope you can recollect who is this fellow who is the poor pedestrian. Uh, Dumping yard, footpath is always considered as a dumping yard for anybody free for all. You can store construction material and then leave the poor pedestrian, to figure out how they will move and take care of themselves. The worst doesn't, end here. They keep continuing. You'll have these electric poles right in the middle of the footpath. God save the poor pedestrian. As I said, the curb height is so will be so much that either you will create our Indian jugaad of creating steps for a person to climb, or you always need a helping hand for somebody to let you climb on the footpath. And of course, if you thought that there is a happy ending for this poor pedestrian, no, the story continues. The poor pedestrian can fall down into open drains on the side and can have a dirty bath. You'll have construction barricades lying in their way, and you can't sometimes recognize or find out. Interestingly, in some situations I've seen on flyovers that the footpath have a reverse slope towards the road. While it is required for the motorized traffic, it is actually a dangerous reverse slope for a pedestrian. These kind of negligence on the engineering aspects uh, uh, actually leads to such poor pedestrian facing this situation all the time. Now, going further with the data that we collected from
Excuse me, sir.
this, yes.
Sir, actually, you are the presenter and the organizer of this meeting, so we are not able to add anyone into this meeting.
Oh, you should have told me earlier. Let me just add all of them 1 second. Sorry. Okay, I'll share the screen again. Yeah, you can see my slide again.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So going further with the data that we had from the State Crime Record Bureau about the road fatalities, we actually tried developing a risk-based modeling of the traffic fatalities, which basically tries to model the number of fatalities of a road user who is being of a victim road user who is being hit by a threat road user as a product of the probability that a crash between the two road users have occurred and the probability that the crash is fatal. I'll not go into details of that. Using the data of Bangalore, we have calibrated this model and then used it to do some simple scenario analysis where we have tried changing the proportion of the mode share or motorized trips in terms of passenger kilometer by different modes. So we have one base scenario, which is the existing mode share in terms of passenger kilometer, and then we have high bus, high car, and high two-wheeler scenario. When you say high two-wheeler scenario, the mode share of two-wheeler is being increased, and it is seen how the fatalities are changing. So what we interestingly see is that in case of high two-wheeler scenario, which is this curve in each one of the cases, you would see that you are actually resulting in maximum fatalities in the high two-wheeler mode share scenario. So which means that if going further in future, if you have more and more two-wheelers being used, we are likely to see more fatalities and more deaths of people, of road users. Whereas in the case of high bus scenario, that means when the passenger kilometers are increased on bus, we are actually seeing the least number of fatalities when you are having a high bus scenario. So promoting public transport actually works out as a win-win situation for both mobility and the road safety. Sorry, the spelling is wrong. In terms of improving the travel times and delay and reducing congestion, but also in terms of reducing the number of fatalities. So there's an interesting scenario analysis that we did, which actually helps us to understand the real causes and how transport planning aspects can be used to improve the road accident and fatality situation. Coming to the education and enforcement, the other two vaccines, the other two E's, which are mainly focused on controlling the human factors, and we'll see what we can actually get. Of course, talking about road etiquettes and correct behavior, this is what we actually see. I mean, people at the railway crossings are, I mean, they are in the biggest hurry, don't care about whether they would live and remain alive or not, no matter even when after going to home you have nothing to do, but you would actually show the urgency as if if you don't cross the railway crossing, the earth will turn and something like that. Even simple precautions. Now, if we think about coronavirus, we all understood, how to protect ourselves, and most of us have religiously followed these precautions. Wearing masks, wearing gloves, washing hands regularly, using sanitizer, keep distance, as our honorable Prime Minister keeps saying. Do gaj ki duri and mask hai zaruri. All that we have done very well, very nicely, and we took it so seriously in terms of this corona pandemic. But when it comes to road safety and simple precautions like helmet and seat belt that we keep talking about, how much do we really take these precautions, which can really help us prevent and avoid being killed? I'm sure all of us should understand that we'll not be lucky enough to get a head replacement like Lord Ganesha. Once you're gone, you're gone. So why don't we take the precautions just like how we have been taking for Corona as seriously as what we are doing for Corona, and how we should do it for the road accidents also. Simple things like wearing helmet and seat belt is not for the sake of policeman. It's for us to save ourselves from this road accident epidemic. Wrong driver attitudes can lead to aggression. This attitude, I'm always right, you're wrong, ignorance towards defensive driving, me first syndrome. You just don't care. You don't even follow the logic that when you're entering across a main road from a crossroad, who should have the priority? When you're entering a circle, who should have the priority of movement first? Those kind of etiquettes need to be followed. But with this me first syndrome, we ignore also about the vehicle maintenance and roadworthiness. Rules of the road do not apply to us. That's the attitude you can see. Moving in wrong direction, these kind of situations we see very common. We don't care whether we live or not, but we can't spend a extra bit of fuel just to be safe. And poor trip planning. When you come out and go out, do some good planning so that you don't end up in situations that you're not familiar with. Consequences are overspeeding, lane cutting, changing lanes frequently, overtaking from right or wrong side, two-wheelerists getting onto footpaths, yelling at others, showing displeasure while driving, not focusing on road while driving, use of mobile phones, doing makeup, drunken driving, all those kinds of things, disregarding the traffic rules and road signages, and then end up with road crashes, which is, as we see from the statistics, we are already seeing a epidemic situation. I'll take you all through a little bit of the aspects that we have studied on these human factors on both education and enforcement from our past research, where we have tried understanding three key components which can improve and control the human factors. One is the driver training and education. Other is the psychophysical traits of driver. This is something which we have least understood, but they are extremely important for us to realize, especially as part of the driver licensing process. And third is the impact of using technology for traffic law enforcement. Now, when you look at driver education licensing system in India, as you know, we have a single phase licensing system with a learning period. Now, which means that you go take a learner's license. The driver education is not mandatory for getting, the learner license or the actual driving license. You're just assumed by the licensing authorities that you will take some lessons and will come back for a test. And many times these tests are done as formalities, and you get a license very easily. And once you get a license, you are given a blanket permission to drive a vehicle in any situation. In actual, learning driving is like learning swimming. All of you who know swimming would understand that just by reading a book which tells you about how you should swim, you can't immediately jump into a pool and start swimming very well. You go through a gradual process of learning swimming from baby pool to shallow depths to deep side of the pool. Then only you and your trainer ensures that you are safe to swim in all kinds of situations. Same is the situation or process of learning driving also, but we don't actually follow the same process of learning for driving as we do it for swimming, and that leads to many situations. So one is to understand the driver education in comprehensiveness. When you look at this kind of a matrix, which we call it as goal for driver education matrix, in the present system, even if you go through some lessons driving lessons and through a motor driving school and so on, you might at best be told about some driving practices in traffic and how you should control your vehicle in different situations. So the presently this importance is given on these bottom two levels, whereas what we actually need is to stress on the importance of driver attitudes and responsibilities, these higher level aspects, your impact of lifestyle, age group, peer pressure, uh, many of these group norms, etc., which have huge implications on road accidents and road deaths. Unfortunately, our driver education and the whole licensing process doesn't focus on it at all. So, over time with our research work, we have actually created 15 different modules based on this whole, basis of goals for driver education, and come up with a comprehensive set of driver education manuals, which of course we have time to time we have given it as a reference material to the licensing authorities, but we still have not seen anything going into the system being adopted on with this kind of framework. This framework is actually now being adopted in many countries like Sweden and other places which have got a zero fatality or zero loss goal with which they are working. All these countries have their driver education framework based on this kind of framework. Also, when you talk about the driver licensing process, as I said, just a single phase licensing system is not good. We should actually ideally have a three-phase system, which is typically called as graduated driver licensing system, where you have a learning stage in which applicant is need to pass a test and only supervised practices are allowed during this period. And then you need a provisional stage where after learner stage, you're not given a blanket license to drive in every situation. It's just like, as I said, these three stages are those three stages of swimming, baby pool to shallow depth to deep side of the pool. So in provisional stage would allow you to drive with restrictions, like for example, and nighttime driving may not be allowed, or you only need to have driving being done with your peer age passengers and in the presence of other people, and then only after successful completion of certain number of hours or duration of provisional stage, then only you get the full license. So this kind of three-stage system is what is required in terms of improving the human element. We did some experiments on these driver education modules with the drivers of KSRTC and BMTC some time back, where we conducted these education programs incorporating the modules that we had developed, and we tried to analyze the impact of the driver education in a before and after simple questionnaire in terms of how their knowledge has actually improved by imparting these modules, knowledge about the safer practices of driving, etc. And we could see in all age group drivers that we had as subjects, we could see a substantial improvement and statistically significant also in terms of, their knowledge that they gain in with respect to adopting safe driving skills. On the second aspect, which is the psychophysical traits of drivers, when you look at uh, driving task actually requires a lot of elements which are quite complex. One is navigation. You keep doing trip planning and route following as you're driving. Suddenly if you realize that there is a congestion, you may rework your trip plan and try to take some detour and so on. That keeps happening. Second is guidance. You keep following the road and maintaining a safe path in response to the traffic conditions, keep balancing yourself, keep watching where is the vehicles next to you and so on. Third is the vehicle control, which is steering and speed control. All these elements keep happening as you're driving. So it's not an easy task, and especially in the Indian kind of traffic situation where you don't have a lane-based driving system, the driving behavior and driving practices are not safer, and so this driving task becomes much more challenging and stressful, which many times all of us feel. So the factors that affect the driving task could be inadequate, insufficient information sometimes. You may go on a road towards a destination where you may not be familiar with the road environment, and by having lack of information through signages or markings, you may end up in a situation where you may not be able to react correctly to the situation and may end up with some accident. Difficulty in handling extreme inputs or uncommon events. Slow processing of inputs. This happens particularly with old age drivers. It's like, as you get older, your RAM and CPU also gets older. It becomes slow. Load shedding due to information overload is just like a computer. As you grow older, and if you have too much of information being pushed to you while driving, it can result in situation where you don't understand or realize what to be done. Error and misjudgment due to the stress due to driving, inexperience, and poor motivation. And of course, at the end, drivers are human. As we always say, tour is human. They make mistakes. When you specifically look at young drivers related contributing factors, age and inexperience plays important role. I've already shown you the graph where the young age group is the most vulnerable age group in terms of the number of fatalities. They're also not in good vehicle control. As I said, since we don't follow this 3-stage graduated driver licensing process, you immediately give a full blanket license to somebody who has not experienced the road environment and driving situations very well. The motivation and attitude for young drivers is very different. They drive for fun, for adrenaline, satisfaction, thrill of speed, etc., to impress your age group people and so on. As compared to somebody who is driving with family and so on. So these young drivers will have more tendency to take risk. Their perceptual and cognitive skills also would require training before they can handle situations. Whereas with respect to older drivers, you may have slow information processing, decreased flexibility and mobility, poorer coordination and dexterity, slower reaction time, reduced vision due to aging, cataract, and other kinds of situations. So all these things need to be kept in mind. So when you think about human functional failures, the factors could be both exogenous and endogenous. In terms of physical, it's about your visual skills, which basically forms a major sensor for use to get all the road environment information and then take decisions, at every moment. Other is through hearing, auditory, and the biomechanical. Now, any defects and situations malfunctioning with these attributes of physical attributes can lead to human functional failures. Likewise, on the psychological aspects, speed judgment and adoption, your ability to react on time, attentiveness and so on, sensation seeking behavior are some of these things. So, critical physical parameters like visual acuity, the normal thing a doctor actually checks when they ask you to read letters written, slightly ahead. That has impact on your ability to see small details like traffic signs and so on. Color vision ability helps us distinguish colors and identify signals, markings, and signages which are color coded. Phoria, which is the ability to have right coordination of both the eyes so that you can have a correct placement of, correct idea of the placement of a obstruction or an object in front of you. If there are any defects with this coordination of both eyes, it can lead to wrong understanding of the vehicle or a pedestrian in front of you and can lead to a fatal accident situation. Likewise, glare recovery. If you don't have ability to recover quickly from glare caused by the headlight of the opposing vehicle, and in India all of us have a tendency to drive always on high beam in all situations, which keeps causing this glare. If you cannot recover on time, then it can actually compromise your visual performance, especially during night, can lead to accidents. Likewise, contrast sensitivity, and when you have a foggy situation or a dusty situation, your ability to contrast between different objects is compromised. And if you don't have, if you can't correct it, or if you can't, recalibrate your driving in such situations, it can lead to situations where, say for example, you cannot identify pedestrians in dark, or you cannot identify a vehicle coming from opposite in a foggy situation. Similarly, depth perception, your ability to judge distances, which is very important to find out, the relative distance between your vehicle and the vehicle in the front, how much safe distance we should keep, or when you are overtaking, when it is safe to overtake when you have a opposite vehicle also coming. If you have any, and this also requires understanding of the relative speeds of the vehicles that are involved in the maneuver. If there are any defects, it can lead to very difficult situations while overtaking or tailgating. Likewise, the visual field, which we call it as the horizontal peripheral view or the vertical peripheral view. If this is not correct, then we may have difficulty in suddenly identifying any obstructions coming from side, or identifying any signal or a sign that is giving us some warning in terms of a hazard in front, further ahead. So if this is a normal situation, if somebody has a cataract, the world would look like this to them. And so it's important that we identify such situations and give either precautions, or ask the drivers to give restricted license to the drivers. Likewise, peripheral loss, you would see something like this. So it's basically a constrained vision, and then you cannot identify any obstructions on time and react to it. Central loss could look like this, again leading to situations. So these visual defects, which we actually don't account for when we go for renewal of license and so on, it's very important to identify. Today in the licensing system, only self-declaration for driving a personal vehicle is sufficient. You just self-declare that you are medically fit, nothing else. So we did some interesting research. I'll not go into details of that, both on the psychological and this vision related aspects. On psychological aspects, we focused on the sensation seeking behavior and how that impacts the situations of road accidents. On the visual related things, we focused on all these visual parameters that I talked about, and did experiments with drivers, in total 387 from KSRTC, BMTC, even VRL Logistics, ISC volunteers, and license applicant from the RTO Yeshwanthpur, and try to understand how these factors are impacting. For example, with KSRTC driver, we found out that there are at least 63% drivers who have a issue of color vision, which is not at the acceptable level when we measured it. Likewise, with BMTC drivers, we identified there are at least 58% who have depth perception on contrast sensitivity related issues which are not in the acceptable limit. And people having such defects, their percentage crash involvement actually goes high, which we have experienced in all these situations, because we also had the accident history of all these drivers. Likewise, the vision test of driver license applicants from the RTO, we had a similar kind of experience. 37% drivers had a color vision issue. Likewise with the ISC volunteers and VRL drivers. So you can see in all samples that we had, there are at least certain sets of drivers who had one or the other visual parameters not as per the acceptable levels. And so it's important that we identify them and make corrections for those aspects. And if they are too fatal for the person who is seeking the license or renewing license, then there should be some restrictions put. The third part is the traffic law enforcement and how technology can maybe made use of it. Problem is, today the traffic law enforcement is heavily manpower dependent, and we keep saying that we have adequate manpower from traffic police. uh, it also leads to a lot of ground level corruption. Recent times when the traffic fines have been increased, if you don't have a technology based mechanism which actually reduces the loopholes and reduces the chances of human intervention, it's only leading to more ground level corruption. So it's important to understand that if we can make use of technology, we can actually improve the traffic law enforcement, and which would then act as the third important vaccine for road accident that we are talking about. So we did some impact study with, in collaboration with traffic police. One was at the Bellary Road or the airport road, where, using speed interceptor. Another was, a dummy PTZ camera at a new location. And we tried to understand how the use of technology actually improves the traffic law enforcement. So first was this experiment that we did at the airport road, where we collaborated with the traffic police. And what we did was we did a before and after study on the same stretch. Before putting the interceptor van, we actually noticed how many violations of speed limit were happening, which is actually 80 kilometers per hour on this airport road. And then when this interceptor was kept, how the violations came down or increased. So you can see on each of these weekdays, without interceptor and with speed interceptor van, you could see huge amount of the violations actually getting down to less than half. So this clearly shows that if you have a 24 by 7 by 365 enforcement of using technology, it can actually help us reduce a lot of these traffic law violations, which are responsible for road accidents and deaths. So overspeeding clearly is one of the causes for a lot of road accidents and deaths, and that can be controlled if you have effective use of technology. Likewise, we did an experiment at the Yashwantpur flyover junction, where when you get down from the Yashwantpur flyover to go towards the center of circle, there is a prohibited left turn, but there is a lot of tendency for vehicle users to try taking this turn, which makes it dangerous because you are already at the downslope and you have a lot of vehicles which are coming from below the flyover from the service road. And so you see a lot of conflict situations happening here. So what we did was we created a test situation where we placed additional signages beforehand, in terms of repeating these signages, so as to ensure that anybody who is coming down can see the sign. And then what we did was we actually put this dummy camera. It was a full camera, but without recording anything. Just letting people understand with this large camera that you are being recorded on camera. And as you turn, there is a small gully that you go into, and there the traffic police people were standing, which could not be seen from the flyover, and booking everybody who does the violation. So we did this for 3 days. 3 days before the implementation of this dummy experiment, 3 days during the implementation of this dummy experiment, and 3 days after we removed this experiment, and we could see how many violations were changing. You can see when the before the enforcement and during enforcement, you see huge reduction in the number of violations. But then once you remove the camera, you are again back to square one. So it's like there is a popular saying that if you keep the tail of a dog, which is always curvy, in a pipe for even 20 years and take it out, you'll still find that the tail is curved only. So we never would learn. Or improve our behavior, which makes it important that the enforcement should be credible, using as much as possible the technology. So these simple experiments actually helps us understand how using technology and removing the human intervention, you can actually enforce traffic law violations, especially of the nature that can lead to accidents and deaths, road deaths. So we got a clear improvements in the situation while we put the cameras. Of course, at the end, when we are trying to implement these 3 E's, we have to also keep in mind to accommodate human limitations, because at the end, all of us are human and we make mistakes. Difficulties are involved in modifying human behavior, that also we need to realize. And then create a forgiving roadside environment. Don't create a roadside environment where if you do a mistake once, by not controlling your vehicle, not identifying a risk situation and getting into accident, your roadside environment should not be such that you get killed. It's like if you commit a mistake in a classroom, the teacher doesn't give you a death punishment. Okay, they will only give you some uh, ask you to stand outside the classroom and so on. But in a road accident situation, we should not create an environment where a person dies, even if they've committed a mistake once, because at the end, even if you control everything, we as humans are bound to make mistakes. And so we also need to identify, we have already seen who are the vulnerable road users. There are different road users, and they use the road environment for this also needs to be accommodated whenever we are thinking about the road safety measures, and identifying whether they are making improvement of especially for vulnerable road users or not. And so meeting the varied needs of road users is very important. At the end, I can only say that prevention is better than cure. So let's try to focus on these three effective vaccines of road safety, and adopt them as much as possible. uh, Take it as seriously as the pandemic of coronavirus, consider it as epidemic. With that, I close my session. And of course, again, thanks and acknowledgement to the safety committee. Back to you, Deepthi.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. This was quite an insightful and interesting presentation. I mean, road safety is very important. All of us are out there, and road accidents is just beyond a collision or just falling. I mean, thanks to you to highlight the factors right from the engineering excellency that we'll have to look out for, the operating model, and of course the human factors that is supposed to be considered. So, having said this, the floor is open for questions. So, folks can unmute one by one and then ask questions. You could also post it in the chat box that you have. It could be called out. So, maybe I'll go on mute. One of you can start.
Anybody who has a question can unmute themselves and ask. Okay, we'll wait for a few minutes.
Maybe I can start off with one,
Yeah,
Dr.
please.
Verma. So,
Please.
yeah. So any research that you and your team are doing in terms of leveraging artificial intelligence? I mean, I did see some of those slides where you had put on these sensors to track on things, but beyond that, is there any way that something can be prevented? Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, so far we haven't. So it basically gets into um, a lot of real-time sensing um, at different locations, and developing algorithms, uh, image processing, and other ways of identifying any possible situations of risk, road accident risk or road fatality risk. If this can be predicted also, as you rightly said, based on building AIs on whatever amount of data that you can gather, it can really help. Such research, of course, is being done in many other countries. We, of course, still face the challenge of the infrastructure of these sensors and the data that we can make use of to develop such kind of AI platform or situations. We can also make use of sensors which are there in our mobile phones, based on crowdsourcing, which basically can generate a lot of data about when you're moving, in terms of your displacement and your trajectory, and other kind of data that can come from the motion sensors that are available in mobile phones also. But these are quite premature at present, I must say, in Indian context, mainly because of the lack of infrastructure of data and the sensors that we can have. Hopefully, with the smart city implementations, if these kind of technologies are better in place, we can make use of them and build AIs. But presently, this research is limited. Hopefully, we can do better.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Verma.
Okay, any questions by anybody? I think all of them have got a good dose of the three vaccines that I talked.
Yeah.
Okay, if not, then of course, people can always write me email and converse with me in case if you have any inputs, any suggestions or ideas to collaborate. We'll be happy. Uh, this should not remain as a one-time dose, as I mentioned at the beginning. This should be a conscious effort and more conscious thinking about road accident being a perennial epidemic that we are facing. So I really urge people to think and take this whole issue to that level of seriousness and collectively see how we can improve and save lives in our country. So I think if there are no questions, then we can possibly uh, end the session now.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
Dr. Verma. I think there are no questions. So,
Yeah.
like, Dr. Verma just mentioned, I think anybody, would like to collaborate or something, you could drop an email to him. And also keep in touch with us from Save Bangalore. So, we are taking up many people's movement across the city in terms of civic issues. So, please stay in touch, and we will certainly come back with many more such programs. We are yet to resume the offline programs until we're comfortable enough. But
Yes.
having said that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't stop all of you to reach back to us anytime. So I on behalf of Save Bangalore committee, thank Dr. Ashish Verma to honor this occasion and then present his findings along with his team. I really thank all your support in giving out this awareness to all our folks, Dr. Verma. So we would, collaborate again for many more programs, and yeah, we'll stay in touch. So thank
Thank,
you, Dr.
thank you.
Verma.
Thank you, Deepti. Have a good evening to all of you and stay safe. That's what I can say. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.